I was halfway through my morning coffee when the ground beneath my porch actually started vibrating, and at first I thought it was construction equipment somewhere down the road because my property sits near open farmland and sometimes heavy trucks. Passed through early in the morning, but then the sound got louder, music shouting, engines revving, and I remember standing up, slowly looking toward the front gate, trying to figure out what I was hearing. That is when I saw the first party bus roll. Onto my land, bright lights, huge speakers, people hanging out the windows yelling and laughing like they were arriving at some concert venue instead of private property, and before I could even process what was happening, a second bus came through. Behind it, then a third. And by the time the fifth one crossed the gate, dust was flying everywhere across my driveway, and nearly 50 strangers were pouring onto my land like they had paid tickets to be there. I just stood there in complete disbelief. Because there is a difference between neighbors crossing boundaries and what this was. This looked organized, planned, intentional. People started unloading coolers, folding tables, speakers, alcohol decorations, even portable lights, and within minutes, my quiet property looked like the setup for some giant outdoor event. The craziest part was the confidence. Nobody was acting confused. Nobody was asking permission. They behaved like they belonged there. One guy even waved at me while carrying a giant speaker toward my barn like I was part of the event staff. I walked down the driveway trying to stay calm because honestly, when you see that many strangers suddenly taking over your property, your brain almost struggles to catch up, and as I got closer, I heard someone say the HOA lady told us this place was reserved for the weekend. The HOA lady. The second I heard that, everything started making more sense and getting worse at the same time. See, for months there had been tension between me and a woman on the HOA board named Linda because she hated the fact that my land sat right beside the upscale community she represented, and even though my property was completely legal, privately owned, and outside most HOA authority, she constantly acted like she had control over it. She complained about my equipment, my fencing, my trucks, even my barn lights at night, and every conversation with her felt less like a discussion and more like she was trying to pressure me into giving up the property entirely. A few weeks before this happened, she actually approached me asking if I would allow the HOA to rent part of my land temporarily for a community summer event, because according to her, they had run out of parking space inside the neighborhood. I told her no immediately because I already knew how these situations go. Damage, trash, liability, noise, and once you let people treat your property like public space, it never ends well. She smiled at the time, but it was the kind of smile that did not feel genuine, and before leaving she said something strange. She said people who refuse to cooperate with the community usually regret it eventually. At the time I ignored it because honestly I thought she was just frustrated. Now I was standing in the middle of my own land watching strangers unload party supplies because apparently she decided my answer did not matter. Before this gets even crazier, make sure you like this video and subscribe to Karen Stories Daily, because what happened after this completely destroyed the image that HOA board tried so hard to protect. I walked directly toward the largest group and asked who gave them permission to enter the property, and several people looked confused before one woman pulled out her phone, showing me a digital flyer advertising a private HOA celebration weekend with my property listed as the event location. My address was literally printed on the flyer. That was the moment I realized this was not some misunderstanding or accident. This had been planned in advance. Linda had actually organized a full event on land she did not own. I told everyone immediately that this was private property and they needed to leave, but most of them thought I was joking because apparently they had paid money to attend and had been told everything was officially approved. Some people started arguing, saying they drove hours to get there. Others claimed they booked hotel rooms nearby for the weekend. And meanwhile, more music kept blasting from the buses while people continued unloading equipment onto my field. I pulled out my phone and called the sheriff because at that point the situation had already gone way beyond a simple trespassing issue. While waiting for deputies to arrive, I started recording everything, the buses, the flyers, the license plates, the setup, all of it, because I had a feeling this situation was about to become much bigger than anyone expected. Then Linda finally arrived. She pulled onto the property in a white SUV, wearing sunglasses, smiling confidently like she was showing up to host some luxury event, and the second she saw me standing there recording everything, her expression changed slightly, but she still walked over acting calm. She actually Had the nerve to tell me I was overreacting and said the community needed the space for one weekend and that I should stop embarrassing myself in front of guests. I looked directly at her and asked one simple question. Did you seriously invite dozens of people onto private property you do not own after I already told you no? And instead of apologizing, she crossed her arms and said, this land affects the appearance of the community, so the HOA has a right to use it when necessary. That sentence alone told me everything I needed to know about how disconnected from reality she had become. By then, several guests nearby had started listening closely because they were finally realizing something was very wrong, and the atmosphere changed fast, from party excitement to nervous confusion. Then the sheriff vehicles arrived and the second deputies stepped out and started asking questions. The entire mood shifted again because suddenly this was no longer some neighborhood disagreement. This had become a legal situation involving unauthorized commercial activity, trespassing, property misuse, and possible fraud, and Linda still had absolutely no idea how serious things were about to become. The moment deputies started speaking with guests, everything unraveled fast because people realized they had paid money for an event that was never authorized, and suddenly the same crowd that arrived excited and laughing started demanding answers from Linda. Several guests showed officers payment, confirmations online, advertisements, and messages claiming the event had full approval, and the more evidence deputies collected, the worse the situation became for her. Linda kept trying to argue, saying the HOA had community authority over the surrounding area, but that argument collapsed immediately once property records were checked and it became clear she had no ownership, no rental agreement, and absolutely no permission to use my land. The deputies ordered the event shut down right there on the spot, and one by one the party buses started leaving while angry guests confronted Linda demanding refunds and explanations. Honestly, the entire scene felt unreal because just hours earlier she arrived acting confident like she controlled everything, and now she was standing there surrounded by deputies trying to explain why she organized a paid event on private property she did not own. A few days later, I learned the investigation had expanded because money had been collected from dozens of people under false claims, and several legal complaints were filed connected to trespassing, unauthorized business activity, and fraud-related issues. The HOA board quickly distanced themselves from her once they realized how serious the situation had become, and suddenly the same people who supported her before acted like they barely knew her. After that, nobody crossed onto my land again without permission. And honestly, the silence afterward felt peaceful, in a way I cannot even explain. What stayed with me most was how dangerous entitlement becomes when someone believes rules only apply to other people. If you made it this far, let me know what you would have done in this situation and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And do not forget to subscribe to Karen's Stories Daily for more stories like this where arrogance eventually meets reality.